everybody.
Of course, you always got the horn in the room to keep the cost up.
But it should be consistent. Sorry about that.
Apologize for the delayed starting time. We've had some printing issues and attendance issues as well. But since we're here, thank you everybody for coming. We're going to start with the roll call and then we'll dive right in.
Chair Evan Chandler.
Present.
Vice Chair Alex Marzolkowski.
Present.
Representative John Hendricks. Representative John Philippe Barros.
Present.
Representative Mike Chippendale. Attorney Ryan Holt for Attorney General Peter Nerona.
Present.
Ms. Christina Fisher.
Present.
Dr. Cedric Creedy. Ms. Michelle Sinclair Brown.
Present.
Mr. Tim Wilkerson.
Present.
And it's noted that Mr. Wilkerson is calling in by phone tonight. Mr. John Simmons. Present. Thank you, Chair. You have the floor.
Thank you. So we've distributed a package of 5 pieces of legislation, one of which you have the wrong version of, and I apologize. We're trying to get you the right version of H711 from last session. There's a substitute A3 version, which Michelle has, but we can't seem to get printed out or copy for everybody else. And I apologize. We'll make it happen eventually. So I wanted to go over each of the 5 pieces of legislation that we're considering, and then get feedback and take some public comment as well. So we can start with the first bill that we have in front of us is a student privacy bill, and it's titled Relating to Public Utilities and Carriers, Duties of Public Utilities and Carriers. Not the most eloquent title, but it's something we can work on. And this is a student privacy law based on Vermont statute pursuant to the Vermont Attorney General's report that we had discussed at the last meeting. And there seemed to be some consensus among industry representatives that student privacy was something that we could work with. So I wanted to put that bill in play. The second bill is a piece of legislation to target and regulate data brokers. And again, this is based on the Vermont legislation pursuant to their Attorney General Study Commission.
What's entitled?
And that bill is entitled Establishing the Consumer Personal Data Protection Act of 2019. And that, again, target data brokers. The third bill, again pursuant to the Vermont Attorney General's report, would establish an Office of Information Technology within the executive branch. The fourth bill is the Data Breach Notification Act. And for those of you who have a copy, there is a number in the top left, 699. And this is based on the model we used in Massachusetts. We have something comparable right now called the Identity Theft Protection Act of 2015. That's RIGL 11-49.3-4. But we're looking at Massachusetts to see if there's anything we can do to strengthen that law and make it better, or if the existing law is adequate. And finally, the elusive H711 substitute A3, which we hopefully have for the end of this meeting, and if we don't, it will be distributed electronically. So does everybody at the table have copies of everything except H711 substitute A3? So I'd like to start with the student privacy legislation to see if anybody has any ideas, including a title. If anyone is afraid of a title, that would be helpful as well. But just to see if anyone has any language issues with it, overall feedback on it, because again, this is the first introduction of a number of these pieces of legislation. So we are wide open for feedback and input.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Is it your intention to submit these as separate pieces of legislation?
Yes, it looks like these would be submitted as separate pieces of legislation, and not even here will necessarily be introduced, depending on the feedback that we get. So these are just some of the best practices from other states, and we'd like to see if they're going to be applicable here, hear back from the public as well.
Jerry, are you looking for specific red lines or just overarching comments or
Both. Both.
So I think at this time I need to give my membership time to really go into the weeds on
Of
some
course.
provide red lines, but I can provide some high-level guidelines.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, as well, your agenda says there will be no public comment.
So it appears that the agenda that was published, as opposed to the agenda that was distributed, there was some discrepancy along the way, and this meeting was intended to have public comment. We're going to have another meeting where there will be an opportunity for public comment as well. To account for that, I think we intended to do that. We have a couple of opportunities for public comment. So,
We would suggest that to help us be informed. It would always be important to us to myself and others, I think, to listen to the people who deal with the legislation elsewhere and as well as here, who will be practitioners, so we'll have to do it. We can look at it from one perspective. And like you, we have a small working group that is going through the legislation. Now we have 5 pieces that we'll go back over the 5 and
sure.
get back to you with something as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and understanding that these were distributed, only a few days ago, everyone's going to have all the red line feedback for that, but I wanted to get everybody a physical copy of it and get the discussion started and get the ball rolling.
We appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right, anybody else have anything to say, broadly speaking, about the student privacy legislation or any specific concerns that jump out to them?
Again, it would be interesting to have you sort of describe what you think the legislation is, says, and what its intent is.
Okay, so there's a summary at the back of page 7 that gives you the overview, and we're looking at getting people that are targeting students and collecting student personal information. And that seems to be a group of people that everyone can agree deserves special protection. So we want to start where we can all agree and then see if we can move up. So that's why I started with this bill. And again, this is a byproduct modeled exactly on the Vermont legislation. And I remember Mr. Wilkerson, here by phone today, mentioned them as a model in terms of a lot of things that they did to address internet security and privacy. Is that correct, Mr. Wilkerson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I would say for the record that overall, I think I can say today that we're pretty enthusiastic about the intention of that bill. I will have to go back to my Rhode Island membership to have them analyze the bill, any final draft that we have. But I think at this point in time, we can strenuously say that we support an effort to implement or enact something similar to the Vermont student privacy language that came out of the AG's report. I can tell you that in the 3 hearings that we held, a vast majority of the time spent on student privacy because this is an issue of concern that there are some bad actors out there that are taking advantage of young people's data. And as we move forward and we try to identify where our biggest return on investment, if you will, on policy is, I think this is an area that is a home run for you, Mr. Chairman, for your colleagues, and for all of us who have spent the time and effort on this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. All right, before we move on to the next bill, Christina?
Oh,
you would
just
like
a
to
question,
say-
yeah, well, I have more of a question, actually. Would you be able to share electronically the student privacy legislation, just to make sure we have the right draft? I believe 3 of the 4 pieces we're considering today were sent electronically prior to this meeting, but I don't believe the student privacy was part of that. So
Absolutely.
I just want to make sure I'm sharing the correct draft of it.
We'll share all of them, and now might be a good time to say this. Anybody that wants a copy, whether you're here or you're on the commission, can contact Bob Millerick. His email is rmillerick, MILLERICK, @rilegislature.gov. And if your email to him bounces back or you don't transcribe it correctly, you can contact me. My email's right on the General Assembly website. We'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of all the legislation. Anyone else on the student privacy legislation?
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, the intent as I read this is that no student information of any student is K-12. What this envisions that there will be no amassing of it, no setting of it in any form.
Well, there are some exceptions that are laid out in the bill, but this is a general prohibition, but there needs to be certain exceptions.
There seems to be a wide variation between some of those non-indicated classes, both age, what you may be able to do for and asking that.
So I'm not collecting the information, so I'm not really sure. That's something I would rely on industry to tell me if it was possible to parse out that data, but there's an intent component to this as well. So I think that as long as we can make that work. We finally have the right version of 711A. So the second bill we're going to take a look at today is bill to regulate data brokers. And this again comes from Vermont legislation. And I know that everybody's going to need more time to look at the red line version and come up with specific suggestions. This is, for those of you that have a physical copy, it's RD700A is in the top left corner. It's Consumer Personal Data Protection Act of 2019. So just from my perspective, in connection with H711A, one of the things that jumped out here to me was that this bill defines personal information and personally identifiable information as well. And I know that defining those two terms has been an issue in all of our discussions. So if anybody has feedback as to whether the definitions used in this bill are transferable to other legislation that we might use, I would appreciate that feedback, positive or negative, so we can get an idea from a language perspective as to whether or not it's a good model to use from an industry perspective.
The feedback that I received internally without the definitions are kind of the same from the Vermont legal brokerage, that would take so really hard on getting those definitions on that, so.
That's good to know. Web Edwards has joined us. Welcome.
Thank you, Joe.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may add, again, I need that caveat of having to just confirm with my Rhode Island members on the specifics and the details of the language. But I can tell you that in addition to the two definitions you just mentioned, the definition of data broker, and I mentioned this in our last meeting, definition of data broker is narrowly drawn on purpose to target those who are the bad actors and those who mishandle individuals' personal individual data, excuse me, and if our intent of this committee is to really go after those who are the bad actors in this industry and are preying upon people who are vulnerable, this is the bill, and that definition, data brokers, is the definition that I think really resonated with the good actors in the industry, well beyond the telecom industry, which I represent. And I think that this is, again, another piece of legislation that should be central to the work that we're putting in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. And like the student privacy bill, it's encouraging to see that we have a couple areas where I think we can make some progress and get most people on board. It's not close to everybody that's contributing to this as well.
Chairman, what are we referring to as good data brokers versus bad? I mean, is there a definition of each?
So within the statute, there's, as Mr. Wilkerson said, there's a definition of data brokers. So that starts on page 5, I believe, of line 24.
So I guess my question is, so there, these bad data brokers, what do they look like? Who are they? Do we know? I mean, who are we actually looking to target? I mean, who are these bad guys?
In my mind, the people that are collecting and selling packages of your personally identifiable information without your knowledge as to where any of your information is going. And they're causing identities stolen, they're causing problems with credit reports, and maybe Mr. Wilkerson can add to this as well, but we're trying to target people that are mishandling your personally identifiable information and causing personal damages in many cases.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that bundling individual data and de-identifying it and selling it is pretty central to what a lot of companies do, not our companies. We don't do that. None of our members sell identified or de-identified information from what I've been told. But a big piece of the internet in general, and I would say a majority of the major companies that people know and use every day do that. So I think that the act of just selling that information is not necessarily bad actors. I think that, I used the example last time, going back to student privacy, that people are mining the web traffic of juveniles, and then they're actually targeting their parents for things like, if the juvenile is sick, trying to target their parents for different types of treatment that would be used for that juvenile's illness. Things that are out of bounds when it comes to minors and maybe violations of HIPAA. There is an underground of people who traffic the data that are not 99.9% of the companies that basically created the e-commerce and the entertainment world that we all enjoy today online. So I would just say that, Mr. Chairman, put the pause on bundling data and selling it. Again, our companies don't even do that, so I'm speaking for companies that I don't represent, but I think that it's a fundamental piece of the internet, is this idea of aggregating information and being able to use it to be predictive analytics, as we talked about last meeting as well. So that definition, the color definition, I think that's for those asking the question. It's not a bright line for me, anyways. But you know the bad actors when you see them.
Okay. All right. Well, that can certainly be part of a discussion that we have as to who needs to be regulated. Do you have any input on that?
No, I just, so I mean, am I to take that what the definition that is here is what a good data broker should look like?
I guess the definition would be
Correct.
the proper data broker.
So this is the definition that we have here on this bad data broker. So the image that we have.
And I think I defer to Mr. Wilkerson, because he has more in-depth idea as to who the good and bad data brokers are. I have sort of a more negative opinion of most data brokering, but I believe that he's correct that we do need to draw the line somewhere.
Right, and I am no expert on this, but I can tell you that there was definitely broad consensus amongst various industries that agreed to that definition. There were prior drafts and that would be much more inclusive, and I think would be more in line with what maybe with what you're envisioning, Mr. Chairman. And there was pretty significant pushback from companies across industries to say that's going to fundamentally change the way we do business, interact with our customers. And there was some serious concern about where to draw that line. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of wordsmithing on the side of on the policy side of the Attorney General's office, trying to get to a place where that definition did target people who would misuse people's data, and versus the rest of us, I would say. And again, it's not even us. I'm speaking for industries that I don't represent, but I think the goal here is forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think the goal of all of us is to try to strike the right balance of protecting people and protecting their personal information when at all possible, to provide them an internet that works for everyone today, and to try to go after and empower the Attorney General to go after people who would violate a law that we could pass that is crystal clear on what is and what isn't predatory in nature. So I can't give you more specifics than that. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this, even though I've spent a lot of hours listening and working on the issue. But Mr. Lopes, I'll work on trying to provide you some, and for everyone else, better examples of who is being targeted by the Vermont law, who is envisioned being potential targets when the Attorney General's office was drafting that language.
And the other point is that this bill sort of gets at those who misuse as opposed to mishandle, and we have a separate data breach notification bill, and there's already something that exists in state law that addresses that. So these are more people that misuse as opposed to the stories you hear about the Marriott, Target, or whoever has been the latest company. So the least $2 billion for personally identifiable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my intention, actually. I misspoke.
Does anybody else have anything to say right now about the data brokers legislation?
Mr. Chairman, just one thing to note. I guess we'll get to it when we get to the overall breach notification act. But the definitions of breach don't necessarily track between that piece of legislation and this one, which I don't know if that's the intention of the legislation, but I think it may lead to confusion down the line should both pieces get through. You have one definition for breach of security, then you have security breach in the data broker legislation. So to the extent that we can have those tracked.
Okay, that's good to know. I made a note of that. I don't think in the future we're going down that path. Thank you. All right, so the third piece of legislation we have is creating an Office of Information Technology in the executive branch. At least personally, it is probably the legislation that I am least enthusiastic about, creating another layer of bureaucracy in our state government. But Massachusetts has done it, and they seem to think that it's made their IT operation more efficient. So I wanted to at least put it out there for everyone to consider and get feedback on.
Mr. Chairman, so didn't the governor at some point in time have a technology officer on board?
She may. That's a good question. That's something we can look into.
And he was housed somewhere in one of the universities or something.
It was Tom Burton prior to the hiring.
There's
Yeah.
seven positions in the state government already.
All right, so unless anybody has any compelling reason to push forward that one, I'm inclined to pull it back. But I wanted to put it out there because it seemed to be a strong recommendation, at least in back and talk to whoever they need to, and see if there's a reason to move forward. And we'll keep it on the agenda with the idea that it may not be going in.
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that you are correct that there was a lot of time spent on that portion of the AG's report. They felt that the legislature, they were looking at these issues to look at them holistically and to make sure that all is being done to ensure that the state government is being proactive and forward-thinking in terms of data, handling it and making sure that it is being used in proper ways. I think that they're more sensitive to this issue, given the fact that, if you may recall, a year plus ago, there were allegations that Russians had hacked into their energy grid. I believe that's what was alleged, but there was some Russian hacking that went on in state government, and the AG was pretty sensitive to that. So I think that's the onus of having experienced a pretty high-profile attack or alleged attack, and then making sure that everyone, all the policymakers in the legislature and the AG's office, were trying to be proactive and follow Massachusetts. There was a couple other states who have done this as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. The last bill we're going to look at today, and everybody should finally have a copy of it, is from last session, H711 substitute A3. So I'd like to start by asking the same question that I've asked that are prior to and that's based on the feedback that I've primarily received on this bill, is that we should sit back and wait for the federal government to do something before we consider taking action, and that this bill could cause a lot of problems. And I've asked people to identify specifically what entity they represent and what the specific problem would be for that entity, so that we can try and make an informed decision as to whether it would be truly a burdensome piece of legislation as opposed to a piece of legislation that would allow people to figure out when they went to a website, when they signed up for internet service, what categories of information were collected about visitors to that website or subscribers to that service, and what entities that information is sold to. Now, the substitute A3 version makes it specific that this doesn't create a right for Representative Barros to find out that Home Depot collected his Social Security number and sold it to Target. It just would give them the right to go to that website and see that they're collecting Social Security numbers, and Target is one of the entities that they sell them to. So with that said, does anybody have any specific feedback to my question or any other feedback after review of the bill?
I guess if you want to take a larger picture, we're one state out of 50. If 49 states do not do this, and we would require all of our companies, both public and private, to adhere to a statute that they're not required any themselves. So that's why a national answer, this is always preferable, because then we have one standard for Rhode Island and 49 different ones. Even if other states require it, and it's a different format, then it becomes a very difficult process. Because not all of our companies are sole practitioners in Rhode Island itself. We have many companies that are international, national. So if we have a requirement here, maybe it's a different one than none in the other states, then we become less competitive and we have our own issues in Rhode Island itself. Sorry, but you want to leave the first question on the answer and the response. It doesn't necessarily apply any industry, but pick one that deals outside of Rhode Island, the customers that are outside of Rhode Island. We have to then require the company here to amass the same information for individuals that they deal with anywhere in the country, or is it just Rhode Island?
So they wouldn't have to amass any information. This would only be if they're collecting
their business model some other companies do not have that. So
I'm having trouble hearing the last.
I'm just saying, if you say I can't amass it here in Rhode Island, then it's a disadvantage for a company that does it elsewhere.
This legislation doesn't prohibit anything. The only thing this legislation does is require you, if you are collecting and selling personally identifiable information, that you tell people what categories, generally speaking, of information you collect, and what entities that information is sold to. So you can achieve compliance with this by posting on the website. And there's no cause of action unless the Attorney General's office has sent a 30-day notice to the affected entity, informing them that they'd be in breach of this statute.
We're the only state that requires that.
So California has something far more extensive and onerous going into effect in 2020.
Funny language, we're not quite California when driving in the market as much as we'd like to be. I think we have a different stance than here versus some of California. I'm just saying we are set as a different standard, whatever that standard might be. If it is separate from the other 49 states, then I think we're at a disadvantage in our companies. We think that's why nationally, most of these answers should be done nationally, as opposed to an individual state and then having a different set of conditions as we go for 10 states or 6 states all have different methodologies of amassing information, selling it as a product. If it's not, again, what's the difference if I have to then notify my customer in Rhode Island only? Do I have to notify the customer that it's just in Massachusetts or North Carolina, when I'm actually collecting on them?
Again, there's no affirmative individual notice obligation. You would just have to have something conspicuously posted on your website or in the user agreement stating the categories of information that are collected and the entities it's sold to. If you don't collect information or you don't sell information, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You wouldn't have to respond to specific requests with specific answers. You could have a broad answer prominently posted on the website, and it wouldn't be a game of gotcha because the Attorney General would have to send you a 30-day warning letter to tell you, look, we know you're doing this. You have to post what you're collecting and who you're selling it to. So it could give consumers an opportunity to decide whether they want to use that service, download that app, go to that website, and what they're really getting into when they do that. But I appreciate your perspective.
Respond to the gentleman.
Certainly.
The national is more appropriate.
That has been the overwhelming feedback that I've received on this since the beginning, which is why if we're
I
going.
don't read the statute as you narrowly defined it. I have to go back and reread it.
Sure.
Because again, any requirement we do willfully, and you're asking companies here to adhere to it. There's a cost and impact to them. I think there's a little bit more of a customer having the ability to ask is different. So we take a look at the statute a little bit different.
And I am more than happy to make changes so that it doesn't appear to be more burdensome than it actually is.
We appreciate that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So Chair, my question is, so truly you were looking for a right to know type of legislation with this bill as it was drafted. And I know that when we were in meetings prior to, the intent didn't actually translate to us as companies as to what was in the bill. I know there were several different things that we talked about in the meeting, whether it was the definitions of private information or personal information, and then the ability to, when we had to then, we had to re-identify de-identified information as it was drafted in the bill. I think was a little bit difficult for the companies that we all work with. But knowing that you're truly looking at a right to know type of legislation, I know nationally at a lot of the different coalitions, they are looking at right to know legislation and what that will entail. So we can bring that back.
Sure, that would be much.
So if that's a separate bill you're looking to do as a right to know.
Yeah, that is the intent of this bill. If it's being read or interpreted differently, then that's the prime purpose of this commission, is to address that and make sure it doesn't do anything more than it's intended to do.
I'll just piggyback off that, I think there's a understanding amongst a lot of the industry that there's been a drastic shift since the first time we looked at your legislation. And there's a desire to be very helpful to you on this issue, and understanding where you're going will help us to be most thoughtful. And there's just a lot of ongoing conversations around this. Things are changing almost daily. So my membership does want to be very helpful to you. And we hopefully will be able to, in the near future, these conversations are kind of ongoing for nature at this point.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll look for more specific suggestions on any or all the legislation that will be discussed today at the next meeting. What deadline to submit legislation?
Spring break, winter break, right into winter break.
14th? Thursday, 14th. All right.
Right after that.
Okay.
So, say sometime after the 22nd. First Tuesday.
So what about that, in terms of setting a date for the next meeting, that week of beginning February 11th? And does this 3 o'clock time work for everybody? And if so, would the 12th, 13th, or 14th be reasonable for people? And the 14th is Valentine's Day, so if anyone's having Valentine's lunch, shouldn't book, double book for that.
We're available any of those days, so whatever.
What days you looking at?
Looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that week, the 12th, 13th, and 14th. And
Anytime, Tuesday, we can have the day. Thursday, Monday, or Thursday, great. But I'm ready. I'll just be ready.
all right, Thursday, how about Thursday? What will we meet on Valentine's Day? At 3 o'clock, is that going to break up any relationships?
The chairman will bring candy.
Yeah. Invite another way. At 3 o'clock, is that reasonable? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, so what is your intent for that meeting, since you intend to submit the bills that could be then, right? So when you send
Yeah, to have an idea of what we're actually going to submit. We can submit legislation a little bit late, that's for the 17th.
You can get it drafted that week of vacation.
Correct.
When you come back that Tuesday, you can submit it, or if you can, if you're local, you can leave it on the desk.
Let's hope everybody's local. I don't want any more scandals. All right, so February 14th at 3 p.m. is the next meeting. We are short on time, but if anybody has some public comment, it wasn't posted, or if anyone came here today with the intention to speak, and you can take some public comment. Randall?
I kind of have a dilemma. I did come with the intention to speak, but I think I didn't get some of the bills that were provided into the committee, and I would prefer if speaking now means I can't speak at the next meeting, then I would prefer to defer my comments. But I guess I will just say briefly, I'm here from Rhode Island Rights, which is the state affiliate of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and the Restore the Fourth. And I do think I'm glad there's some discussion of the definition of personally identifiable information or personal information, which has been a term that's been defined in many ways, and I think often defined badly. And I guess I will just mention one idea here, which is that the data. I believe the Data Broker Act that has one good move, which is not often done in defining personal information, which is to recognize that usually releasing a single piece of information is not a problem. I don't mind if my name is put up somewhere or if my address is put up somewhere. I do mind if my credit card number is put up somewhere. So just releasing a credit card information and no other piece of information, that would be a problem. But most privacy breaches are not like that. Unless it's something extra sensitive like a credit card number, the kind of privacy breaches that are important are when you have something with two pieces of information linked together. The first is a personal identifier, and I have a long list of language for what a personal identifier is, like a first and last name, an alias, the portion of your name that identifies you, precise geolocation data or address, social security number, driver's license number, passport number or similar identifier, phone number, license plate number, IP address, visual or audio information about you, or any other piece of information that can, when combined with publicly or commercially available information, can identify the person with reasonable specificity. I bridged that a little. But that's but need a definition of what's a personal identifier. And as privacy breach matters, and I'd like this to be consistent through all the legislation, the privacy breach matters is usually when you have a personal identifier combined with some other sensitive information such as your buying habits or your profession or your race or ethnicity or relationships. So in most cases, that's you need that two-factor approach to personally identifiable information. The only time when you have just one factor would count is if it's something like email address or maybe your credit card number. So yeah, just want to make that point.
And anything that you want to submit in writing in advance of the next hearing or after next hearing, written public testimony is encouraged as well. Some of the things more detailed insights.
Okay. These aren't bills yet, that's probably not, you can't see them online or anything, but they're just drafts.
Thank you, Raymond. Anybody else want to speak today, or would you like to move on instead? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.